Welcome back to Zombie Recaps. Today, we will talk about a zombie and horror movie from 2016 titled Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date with all our latest and most exciting content. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Colonel Darcy investigates the appearance of a zombie at the house of a wealthy family. He arrives at the home, which is having a wisp party, informs everyone that he is here to have an official business. And there's a report that someone inside the room has zombie bites. Mrs. Featherstone, who held the party, approaches him and denies it, saying there has not been a zombie incident in Hertfordshire for over 2 years. He then continues informing everyone that a newly infected zombie is almost impossible to detect until they consume their first human brains, at which point the transformation speeds up with each slaughter. He then sits and plays cards with 3 people before removing a tiny vial carrying a specific set of flies capable of detecting the undead. An old lady claims that the buzzing quiet annoys the room, but Darcy replies that it does not concern the buzzing but rather when the buzzing stuffs. It is a shocking incident when the flies fall on a man beside Darcy, causing his eyes turns to read. Darcy decapitates the guy after breaking glass and stabbing him in the neck. Darcy asked one of the ladies if there is anyone who would confess who was infected. Mrs. Featherstone shook her head. When Darcy leaves the room, one of the ladies mentioned that Mr. Kingston, the one who turns into a zombie, is a nice living upstairs. She then flees upstairs to check on her. When she opens the door, the niece is also transformed into a zombie and attacks her. We hear Mr. Bennet's voice recount the genesis of the zombie epidemic. On the screen you see a pop-up book describing the story. The Black Plague swept across London, spawning undead to keep London and the zombies apart. They build a wall, trapping them in the in-between. The 4 horsemen believes in preparing to emerge from hell and bring about the apocalypse. The Bennet sisters, Elizabeth, also known as Lizzie, and her sisters, Jane, Kitty, Lydia and Mary, undergo training in weapons and martial arts. Mrs. Bennet desires that her daughters marry rich men. As it turns out, the families move in nearby and host a party, and Mrs. Bennet hopes that the young and attractive Mr. Bingley will win over one of her daughters. Elizabeth is not one to find a spouse. Lydia makes a nasty remark regarding Elizabeth's inability to attract men. She then chases Lydia out of the room. The sisters begin preparing for the ball and hide some weapons under their shoes and dresses. The Benefits go to the ball. Cleanly stares immediately at Jane and asks her to dance with him. After the dance, Fainley suggests to Darcy that he will dance with one of the sisters. Darcy sees Elizabeth, but he remarks that she is unattractive, which Elizabeth overhears. She walks away but accidentally breaks a bottle of glass. She goes outside sad and runs across a lady she recognizes as Mrs. Featherstone, who is a zombie. Mrs. Featherstone is ready to reveal something to Elizabeth, but Darcy blasts her head off. A swarm of zombies attacks the group, forcing the Bennet sisters to take action. They do a slow motion effect, making them look dazzling at the same time as bad girls. Darcy is mesmerized by Elizabeth as he sees her in battle, killing every zombie in their way. While the ladies begin their training, they talk about Mr. Darcy, teasing about Darcy saving Lizzie. Lizzie denies, believing that Mrs. Featherstone is about to bite her, and that Mrs. Featherstone is a civilized woman and would not do something to hurt her. One of her sisters kicks Lizzie while she is unguarded, which makes her angry. She then chases her sister out of the room. Meanwhile, Jane receives a letter from Mr. Bingley and invites her to have tea. The 2 sisters playfully scheme behind Lizzie and push her down. Jane rides on a horse, but she tells her mother that she prefers to have a carriage. Her mother advises that she should show more affection to Mr. Bingley to like her more. Jane rides away on her horse alone outdoors. Jane later encounters a zombie. She falls from the horse. When the horse gets scared by the zombie, her pistol jams and she fights the zombie in hand-to-hand combat. She kills it, but then she sees a zombie lady with a baby zombie. Jane hesitates and the zombie attacks her. Lizzie arrives at Bingley's residence, and they informed her that Jane confines her room. Darcy tells Bingley that he will not make the same mistakes with Mrs. Featherstone. Is that the worst party? Darcy enters the room with a physician. He opens the vial, where he let the flies flee to identify as zombie. Still, Elizabeth catches each flies in her hand and returns them to Darcy. Lizzie informs the Bingleys and Darcy in a room that Jane is now fast asleep. Mr. Bingley offers Lizzie to sit and join them, which Lizzie rejects. Him claims she prefers reading a book than playing cards. One of the Bengali sisters speaks in the Japanese language and less than her. Lizzie finds a book and Darcy notices it and tells the title of it. Lizzie informs him that if he has not read it in its original dialect, he has not read it honestly. Everyone stays quiet until Lizzie has left the room. At night, Lizzie watches Darcy training himself with a sword outside. In the morning, Lizzie wakes up hearing the voice of her mother and sisters inside the mansion. She hurriedly helps Jane walk out of the house into the carriage. Mrs. Bennet offers Mr. Bingley an idea of breaking the terrible tension with zombies. A ball on Netherfield. Darcy refuses, for it is too dangerous, but Mr. Bingley gladly accepts the idea. Parson Collins, a cousin of the Bennets, pays a visit and expresses his desire to marry one of the sisters. He first has his sights set on Jane, but then Mrs. Bennet informs him that she is already waiting for a proposal from another man. To warn of his disappointment, Mrs. Bennet suggests Lizzie, for she is available and almost as fair as Jane. Later on, Mr. Collins offers to read them a book, but the two younger sisters interrupt him. They would like to walk to Marytown to visit their Aunt Phillips. Their father agrees as long as Jane and Lizzie are willing to accompany them. Lizzie agrees, but their mother also offers Mr. Collins to go with them. As they walk on the road, Lizzie notices something. The four sisters take their swords out together and find Penny McGregor's carriage fall on the hill. A person is trapped inside and calls for help. Penny then kicks the door open and approaches Jane, saying there is an accident with the ladies in column C beside the carriage, that someone is eating the force and the person. The ladies shoot Penny's head and Jane kicks the body to the ground. Collins steps in and comments that he is unaware that zombies can now learn how to set such traps. They continue their journey because he is struggling with carrying all four rifles. Collins offers to help but only puts the sling back into her shoulder, and he is claiming that Calantry is not yet dead. On the way, they meet Lieutenant Diddy, together with him as Lieutenant George Wickham. The ladies request Lieutenant Wickham to accompany them to their Aunt Phillips, when she gladly accepts. When they encounter Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy, Lydia reminds Mr. Bingley about the party and suggests inviting Mr. Wickham. Wickham and Darcy's exchange glares before leaving. Lizzie asked him what his connection with Mr. Darcy is. Wickham answers that both of them grew up together. Darcy's father treats him like his second son. Still, eventually, after being slain in the Second Battle of Kent, Darcy sends him away and gives his living to another man. Lizzie feels disappointed to hear this from him. The sisters attend to another Bingley's ball. Elizabeth meets Mr. Wickham again. That gets interrupted by a person that then asks him to dance. Lizzie feels uncomfortable dancing and being close with Parson and wishes to be away from him. She quickly says yes, as she hears someone behind her offer a dance. To her surprise, R.C. is the one who approaches her. Parson approaches Darcy, making things even more uncomfortable. The two then excuses themselves, leaving Parson alone. Mrs. Bingley is drunk and spurts about Jane marrying Bingley. She thinks advice to throw her younger sisters in the way of other rich men. Lizzie covers her mother's mouth, but she bites it. Darcy overhears and leaves the room. One of her sisters informs she has not found her father or Lydia anywhere. Lizzie then goes in search of them. She encounters Bingley, who is also looking for his butler. The door opens and shows that his butler is dragging onto the floor. Bingley suggests they should call Darcy, as he says there is no time, and grabs a sword in a wall and hands an axe to Bingley. While carefully going downstairs, family grabs by a zombie. Lizzie kills the zombie before it bites him. Lizzie recognizes the zombies and asks how they get inside. The zombie mentions they have a new friend who lets them in at the party. Darcy jumps in and helps Elizabeth in her battle against the creatures. Darcy sees Bingley on the ground unconscious. He prepares his sword to strike, and as if Lizzie has zombie bites. Lizzie explains he just fell, then only hit his head. A day later, Jane receives a letter from Bingley, informing her that they will have to move to London and are unsure when they shall return. Later, Parson Collins attempts to marry Elizabeth, but demands that she give up her life as a warrior, which he flatly refuses to do, even for a man. Lizzie leaves and goes to the woods alone. She encounters Wickham, and he asked her to go with him somewhere. They both arrive at a church called the In-Between, where a priest is having a ceremony, and Lizzie suddenly notices that everyone there is already zombies. Wickham stops Lizzie from panicking and explains that zombies are placed in the house and given animal flesh to prevent them from fully transforming into zombies. He asked Elizabeth to join him in his efforts to assist the zombies. A day later, Charlotte, a younger sister of Lizzie, informs her that she is to marry Mr. Collins, and she will present herself to Lady Catherine. She requires a chaperone, and Charlotte asks Lizzie to be hers. Lizzie gladly accepts it, but only if she also invites Mr. Wickham in one room Darcy's, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a renowned zombie slayer with considerable power, meets with Elizabeth Parson. Charlotte, Wickham and Darcy. We can propose his plan to Lady Catherine to end the war between the undead, which Lady Catherine displaces. Darcy orders the guards to take Wickham away at night. As he sets out to have some fresh air and encounters Wicker, Elizabeth learns that it was Darcy that persuaded the Bingleys to leave. He proposes to run away with him, but she refuses. In the morning, Darcy approaches Elizabeth with his proposal and admiration towards her. She shows her displeasure and challenges him to a duel. They fight while they talk. Both are capable fighters. Darcy unintentionally unbuttoned her blouse, making him out of focus. But in the end, Darcy flees and apologizes, wishing for her health and happiness. Later than Lizzie cries as Charlotte and Parson arrive. Later, Darcy writes a letter to Elizabeth. He apologizes for his actions and explains that he let Jane and Bingley separate because he hears Mrs. Bennet's intention. Darcy also discusses Wickham's attempt to elope with his sister to inherit her wealth. Darcy claims his love for Lizzie, but has already found that he can never win her in this life. He is now defending London from zombies, and asked Elizabeth to be ready and prepare for the zombies' attack. Jane informs Lizzie that Lydia has gone with Wickham. Lizzie has an idea of where they could be and prepares to go after them. Lady Catherine and her bodyguard Wilhelm that approach Elizabeth. Catherine is aware that Elizabeth and Darcy develop their feelings, but she still wishes Darcy to marry her daughter. Wilhelm assaults Elizabeth, but Elizabeth fights him off with her claws and kicks him, crushing him beneath a mound of bricks. Catherine says she can't tell whether she admires Elizabeth's ability as a fighter for her strength as a lady. Elizabeth and Jane start their journey to the in-between. Mr. Bingley drops a bomb and a bunch of zombies, but one of the zombies grabs his scarf before he can escape. He struggles with it until Jane comes and saves him from the explosion and the zombies. The undead is on their way to London. Elizabeth rejoins Darcy, and the in-between can assist him in his fight against the undead. She informs him that Wickham has run off with Lydia and St. Lazarus. Garcia tells her that he saw razed to the ground 5 days ago. Lydia could not possibly survive, and after that, he then informs her that he must now depart for Hingham Bridge. Lizzie notices Mr. Bingley is acting weird and discovers Mr. Darcy lies to Lizzie and goes to St. Lazarus alone. She then quickly rides away towards St. Lazarus. Darcy discovers Lydia and helps her escape. Wickham appears and tries to shoot Darcy, but a middle gate blocks him. The zombies came running when hearing a gunshot. Darcy let Lydia escape with his horse. Darcy runs into Wickham again and battles him, ultimately impaling Wickham and discovering a bite mark on his chest, indicating that Wickham was on death all along. Elizabeth rides in and cuts off Wickham's arm, knocking him out before he can murder Darcy. The zombies are running after Darcy and Elizabeth. And is Darcy and Elizabeth right over the bridge? The other Londoners blown up to keep the undead at bay. Darcy gets wounded in the explosion to coming unconscious. Elizabeth confesses her feelings for him while crying. Darcy returns to Elizabeth after his recovery and informs Elizabeth that she hears what she said on the bridge. After he proposes to Lizzie, who agrees to engage in a very deep and time-consuming tongue massage. Corse and Collins presided their combined wedding with Bingley and Jane. The lovers leave together to live happily ever after. Just after the credits, they see something outside the gates. Wickham, now one arm, is leading the zombie army toward them, preparing for a new battle. That is all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, give it thumbs up. Subscribe to Zombie Recaps and turn on notifications so you can get notified by YouTube when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching.